The studio floor at Nippon Television's Stage 4 in Tokyo was tiled in pale gray and lit from above by banks of fluorescent panels that turned everything beneath them the color of old bone. It was a Thursday evening in October of 1970, and the audience, 412 people arranged in 3 curved tiers, had been seated for 40 minutes before the broadcast began. The technicians moved along their lanes with the practiced quiet of people who had done this enough times that the work no longer required thought. A camera dolly rolled left. A boom operator raised his arm. The floor director counted backward with his fingers. The man in seat 11 of the 4th row, left center section, was wearing a white cotton t-shirt under a dark blue jacket. He was 29 years old, 5 feet 7 inches tall, and 140 pounds. He had not told the production staff who he was. He had purchased his ticket through an intermediary, paid in cash, and arrived 45 minutes early with a cup of green tea he finished before the doors opened. He sat with both feet flat on the floor and both hands in his lap. He did not speak to the person beside him. He watched the stage. The man who would step onto that stage 12 minutes later was 24 years old, 6 feet and 1 inch tall, and 207 pounds. His name was Vicha Rudchayo, and he had not lost a professional Muay Thai contest in 31 consecutive bouts. He held 3 regional championship titles covering Thailand, Cambodia, and the southern provinces of Laos. He had been the youngest fighter in the country to accumulate a professional record of that length without a defeat, and the governing body of Thai boxing had certified the record 6 weeks earlier at a ceremony in Bangkok attended by the Minister of Sports. He had broken 2 opponents' orbital bones. He had retired 1 man's jaw. He had been tested in 5 countries by fighters who had prepared specifically to beat him, and none of them had. He came from a village in the Chiang Mai province where boys began pad work at the age of 6. He had begun at 5. His Muay Thai coach, a former national champion named Somchai Burin, had been quoted in a Thai sports newspaper 4 months earlier saying that in 30 years of training fighters, he had never encountered a student whose timing arrived pre-installed, as if the understanding of distance and rhythm had entered the boy before formal instruction could reach it. The newspaper had run the quote alongside a photograph of Rudchayo standing with both arms raised after a knockout victory in Phuket. He was not smiling in the photograph. He was simply standing, the way a building stands. He was also the co-host of the evening's program, a sports variety broadcast that had run on Nippon Television every Thursday for 2 years. He had been invited to appear because the producers believed his presence, young, decorated, physically imposing, would bring energy to a segment that had been underperforming in the 20 to 40 male demographic. They were correct about his energy. They were less correct about how it would be expressed. The segment was called The Challenge Floor. It invited prominent figures from martial arts and athletics to discuss their disciplines in front of a live studio audience, answer questions from a journalist moderator, and occasionally demonstrate technique on a foam-padded area positioned at stage left. The format had produced memorable television twice in its history. It was about to produce something else entirely. At 8 minutes past 8 o'clock, Vicha Rudchayo walked to the center microphone on the challenge floor and said what he said. In the next 7 seconds, 412 people stopped breathing. One of them would write about it 31 years later. What he wrote, and what the others would say in the years that followed, is the reason you need to hear this story from the beginning. Nobody in that studio understood what they were watching. Nobody except one man. And he was sitting in seat 11 in the 4th row in a white t-shirt, with his hands in his lap and his feet flat on the floor. If you have followed stories like this one before, you know that what happens in 7 seconds can take a lifetime to fully see. If you are watching this for the first time, stay with it until the end. Because what was said from the floor of stage 4 that Thursday evening, not by Rudchayo, but by the man in the 4th row, would travel in ways that stories built from extraordinary moments always travel. It would grow, shrink, migrate, shed false details, and gain true ones. And at the center of all of it, unchanged across every version, would be the same 7 seconds. But to understand the 7 seconds, you have to understand the 40 years that preceded them. Bruce Lee was born on the 18th of November 1940 in San Francisco, California at the Chinese Hospital in the Jackson Street neighborhood of Chinatown. His father, Li Hoi Chuen, was a Cantonese opera performer of considerable local reputation, and his mother, Grace Ho, was Eurasian, half German, half Chinese, a fact that would matter a great deal to certain gatekeepers in the martial arts world in ways both petty and serious. He entered the United States on his birth certificate. He grew up in Hong Kong. He returned to the United States at 18 years old with $77, a trunk of clothes, a cha-cha trophy from the Hong Kong ballroom circuit, and a functional mastery of Wing Chun Kung Fu that he had been developing since the age of 13 under the instruction of Ip Man, a teacher of such capability that his own students would one day become subjects of their own separate stories. Bruce Lee was 138 pounds when he returned to America. He was 5'7". He wore glasses in private. He drank lemon tea in the mornings and occasionally Vitasoy from a small thermos he kept in the front pocket of a canvas bag. He was funny in the way that certain very serious people are funny, without trying, and usually at the expense of a person who had underestimated him. He was also, at the point when the world would begin to discover him, not yet famous outside of a small circle of martial artists and a slowly growing community of students he had begun teaching in Seattle, then Oakland, then Los Angeles. The circle would widen, but in 1970 it was still forming. By 1970, the world knew who Bruce Lee was, in the way that a significant fraction of a large audience knows a person, completely in certain rooms and not at all in others. He had appeared on American television in The Green Hornet. He had trained some of the most physically capable men in Hollywood. He had developed a philosophy of movement that had no true precedent in the formal martial arts community, and that the formal martial arts community largely refused to validate on those grounds alone. He was in production on a film project that would eventually become The Big Boss, and he was corresponding regularly with producers and directors in Hong Kong about future work. He was also, separately and without any financial motive, traveling to dojos and gyms and training halls across the United States, Japan, and Hong Kong, teaching without credential, and occasionally accepting invitations to demonstrate technique in front of audiences that had no particular reason to believe he was anything more than a Chinese-American actor who held a plausible claim to martial arts ability. He had purchased a ticket to the Thursday broadcast of the Challenge Floor because a mutual acquaintance had told him that the evening segment would feature demonstrations of elite Muay Thai technique, and Bruce Lee wanted to watch elite Muay Thai technique. He was, above most other things, a student. He brought a notebook. It was in the inside pocket of the dark blue jacket. He was not there to be seen. He had specifically asked the acquaintance not to tell the production staff he was coming. He would watch, he would learn, and he would leave. At 8 minutes past 8 o'clock, Vicha Rodchayo walked to the center microphone, adjusted it upward by 2 inches to accommodate his height, and spoke in the deliberate, composed tones of a man who had planned his words before the evening began. He said he had watched the growth of what he called American martial arts over the previous decade, and that he respected the ambition behind it. He said that ambition was not technique, and that technique was not wisdom, and that wisdom in a fighting art was only built through the particular kind of pressure that a controlled environment could not replicate. He said these things with the measured confidence of someone announcing a conclusion already reached, rather than an argument still in progress. Then he said the name of Bruce Lee. He said that Bruce Lee had been presented to the world as a figure of martial authority, and that this presentation was, in his view, a product of American marketing rather than Japanese or Thai or Chinese competitive validation. He said that performing movement on a film stage was not the same as demonstrating it under pressure, and that no camera and no script could substitute for the real test, which was contact with a trained opponent who had not agreed in advance to lose. He said that the style Bruce Lee had publicized, the thing he called Jeet Kune Do, was, in the language of those who trained seriously, a philosophy decorated with technique rather than technique anchored to philosophy. He said this in front of 412 people on a live broadcast with 12 cameras rolling and 41 production staff present and a boom operator who would later describe the quality of the silence that followed as the specific silence of a room where everyone has just heard something that will require a response. He then asked, from the microphone, if Bruce Lee happened to be present. He smiled when he asked it, which was the only thing he would later identify as a mistake. The man in seat 11 of the fourth row, left center section, did not respond immediately. He set his hands on the armrests of the chair. He looked at the stage for 3 seconds, which is a very long time in a room where 411 other people are watching the same thing. He then looked at the notebook in the inside pocket of his jacket, as if deciding whether to put it away. He put it away. He stood. He did not raise his hand. He did not speak from the seat. He simply stood up. He was 140 pounds. The fluorescent light above him was the color of old bone. A woman in the third row recognized him at the same moment as a man in the first row. And neither of them said anything aloud, but something moved through the audience in the way that a current moves through water when the source of it is disturbed, not noisily, but completely. He did not walk quickly. He descended the left side aisle at a pace that suggested he was not going anywhere in particular but had decided, without drama, to go there. He removed his dark blue jacket as he walked. He folded it once. He held it in his left hand. He did not hand it to anyone. He set it on the edge of the stage and stepped up onto the padded platform in his street shoes, which were plain dark canvas shoes with rubber soles, and he stood 6 feet from Vitya Rudchayo and looked at him. The floor director, a veteran of 12 years of live production, later said that at this moment he made the decision not to cut to commercial. Vitya Rudchayo looked at the man standing 6 feet from him. He had the specific problem of a person who has made a public statement and must now either honor it or explain it in front of an audience that has noticed the difference. He had the additional specific problem of not having expected the statement to be answered this way, in this room by this person in street shoes. He is already behind. He just does not know by how much yet. Rudchayo was a professional. He managed his expression. He said, in the same composed tone he had used at the microphone, "You want to demonstrate something." It was not precisely a question. Bruce Lee said 2 words. He said, "Show me." If you have been following this story so far, and you understand what those 2 words contain, the invitation, the patience, the absolute absence of threat, you already know that the outcome of the next 7 seconds was not decided on the padded floor of stage 4 at Nippon Television. It was decided in a training hall in Hong Kong when Bruce Lee was 13 years old, and in every hour of work that followed for 16 years. But before we get to the 7 seconds, there is something you need to understand about what a fight actually is. Not a performance of a fight. Not a filmed representation. The real thing, between 2 real people, both of whom know what they are doing. A fight is a conversation about distance. Every movement in it is a sentence. Every step forward is a claim, and every step backward is a concession, and neither of them means what they appear to mean until the distance between 2 people collapses below the threshold where technique becomes instinct. What makes a fighter dangerous is not his power. Power is available to many people. What makes a fighter dangerous is his understanding of where the conversation is at every moment before his opponent understands it. The person who controls the distance controls the story. The person who controls the story controls the ending. This is not a metaphor. This is the mechanics of what you are about to hear. Vitya Rudchayo was the best at this that he had encountered in 31 professional contests. He was genuinely, documentably, professionally exceptional at controlling the distance of a fight. This is important to understand. What happened in the next 7 seconds was not a demonstration of a lesser fighter meeting a greater one. It was a demonstration of one kind of mastery encountering a different kind entirely, one that had been built from different materials and had been tested in ways that do not produce trophies or records or certification from governing bodies in Bangkok. Before you find out how those 7 seconds ended, if this is the first story of this kind you have encountered, make sure you subscribe and tell us in the comments where you are watching from. We will continue from this point. Nothing has happened yet. The 2 men stood 6 feet apart on the padded platform of stage 4. Vitya Rudchayo settled into his stance. It was a professional Muay Thai guard, right foot forward, both hands elevated. Weight distributed over both feet in the ratio he had used in 31 professional bouts. It was not theatrical. It was the posture of a man who had done this more times than the audience could estimate, and who had always walked away from it intact. Bruce Lee stood with his hands at his sides. He did not stretch. He did not raise his arms. He did not roll his neck or set his feet in any formal alignment. He stood in street shoes with his hands at his sides, and he looked at a point between Vicha-Rodchayo's eyes that was not Vicha-Rodchayo's eyes, and he waited. The boom operator, whose name was Kenji Maruyama, would say years later that in his 11 years of working live broadcast he had heard many kinds of crowd silence and that they were not all the same. He said the silence in that room in the moment before Rodchayo moved was the kind that has a weight in it. Not the silence of shock. Not the silence of anticipation. The silence of a room where 412 people have simultaneously understood that they do not know what they are watching, and have become very still in order to find out. Rodchayo moved. He opened with a left teep, a front snap push kick, delivered from the right foot forward stance at a range of 5 feet, aimed at the solar plexus. It was not a finishing technique. It was a range-setting technique, designed to measure the distance and create the space for a follow-up combination. It was the first sentence of the conversation. It did not land. Not because Bruce Lee blocked it, not because he stepped backward. Because he was, at the moment the kick arrived, no longer at the point in space where the kick was directed. He had moved 11 inches to the left in the time between the commitment of Rodchayo's hip and the extension of his leg. 11 inches. The boom operator stopped moving. The floor director leaned forward in his booth. A woman in the second row placed both hands flat on her knees. This is the first second. Rodchayo reset. A fighter of his experience does not pause to process. He read the movement, short left displacement, no counter pressure, and recalibrated. He threw a right roundhouse kick, low, targeting the outer thigh of Bruce Lee's left leg, a technique that had ended professional bouts because the accumulated damage of a checked Muay Thai low kick to the lateral femur creates a muscular shutdown that even a trained fighter cannot fully prevent. He threw it with full commitment. He threw it at a target he had measured correctly. Bruce Lee was not there. He had moved again. Not backward, not sideways in the conventional sense. He had stepped into a position that placed him at the inside of Rodchayo's right leg as the kick completed its arc, which meant the kick passed behind him. He was now 8 inches from Vicha-Rodchayo's right ear. He was inside every technique the man owned. He was in the space where Muay Thai does not operate, because Muay Thai is built for ranges of 2 feet and beyond. Bruce Lee was 8 inches away, and he had gotten there before the roundhouse kick had finished traveling. The tournament director from the Thailand Boxing Federation. A man named Arthit Sriwan, who was seated in the production company's guest row and who had watched 1,100 professional Muay Thai bouts in his career, would describe this moment in a letter written to a colleague 14 months later. He wrote, "I had never seen anyone achieve that inside position that cleanly against a fighter of Rodchayo's category. It was not faster reflexes. It was earlier understanding. He knew where the kick was going before it went there. I do not know how to account for this other than to say that I believe he was reading things I was not seeing. This is the second. Rodchayo made his third attempt. He brought his right elbow across in a horizontal arc, an elbow strike, the most dangerous close-range weapon in Muay Thai. The technique that had broken 2 orbital bones in his professional career, thrown from the inside position where he now found his opponent standing. He brought it with every kilogram of his 207 pounds behind it. It did not complete. Bruce Lee placed his left forearm against the inside of Rodchayo's right elbow at the precise point in the motion where the force of the strike had not yet organized itself, which is the only point where 140 pounds can interrupt 207. He placed it there not in the way of a block. A block meets force with force and loses the mass calculation. But in the way of a redirection, a small interruption at the beginning of the sentence before the sentence has meaning. The elbow went left instead of forward. It went left at a point in the arc where Rodchayo's weight was entirely committed rightward, which meant he had to take a half step to maintain his base. He took the half step. In that half step, in the adjustment of a 207-pound professional fighter who had not taken an involuntary step in 31 professional bouts, something passed through the room that was not sound. The journalist moderator, sitting at the desk at stage right, set down her pen. The coffee cup belonging to a segment producer in the second wing had been raised halfway to his lips at the beginning of the sequence. It remained there, at that height, for the duration of the exchange. It was not set down. It was simply held, suspended, at the height it had reached when the world changed. This is the third second. Bruce Lee did not pursue the opening. He stepped back. Not because he needed distance, because the lesson was already complete. He stepped back to the 6-foot mark, and he stood with his hands at his sides, and he looked at the same point between Vicharadchayo's eyes that was not Vicharadchayo's eyes. This is the 4th, 5th, 6th second, the return, the stillness, the waiting. On the 7th second he raised his right hand, open palm upward, fingers together. He extended it toward Vicharadchayo. He held it there. The studio was as quiet as a building that has forgotten anyone is inside it. Not 412 people holding their breath. 412 people who had already exhaled without noticing and had not yet thought to breathe again. The light on the studio floor was the color of old bone. Outside in the streets of Tokyo, traffic moved at the pace traffic moves in a city where the city does not care what is happening inside any particular building. A block and a half away, a delivery vehicle was backing slowly into a loading bay. The driver was watching his mirrors. He did not know that 7 seconds earlier, something had happened nearby that would be recounted in 6 languages across the next 3 decades. Vicharadchayo looked at the extended hand. There are 2 kinds of men in the moment after an honest defeat, and the difference between them is not talent or training or professional record. It is the distance between what a man has told himself about himself and what has just been demonstrated in front of 412 witnesses. Most men close that distance with an excuse, because the excuse is protective and the apology is not. Radchayo stood at that distance for a moment that the journalist moderator would later estimate at 6 seconds, though others present placed it closer to 4. He stood with the specific expression of a man who has arrived at a fork in the road in public and understands that whichever direction he chooses will be the direction people remember. He chose. He extended his own hand. He gripped Bruce Lee's forearm in the traditional Muay Thai fighter's greeting, a gesture of acknowledged skill, not consolation. And he held it for 3 seconds. He then stepped back. He said something low and direct, not into the microphone, not for the audience, just for the man standing 6 feet from him. What he said was witnessed by 2 people, Bruce Lee and Arthit Sriwan, the tournament director seated in the guest row who had spent his career learning to read lips during bouts. Sriwan would confirm the exchange in his letter 14 months later. He wrote that Radchayo said, "I did not know that was possible." And he wrote that Bruce Lee replied, "Most things are possible from the inside." Radchayo nodded once. He stepped back to the microphone. He looked at the audience. He said into the live broadcast, in Japanese, "I was wrong about what I said before. I want to correct it." Then he said nothing else. He walked off the stage. The floor director waited 11 seconds. Then he sent it to commercial. Kenji Maruyama, the boom operator, lowered his arm. He looked at the segment producer who had been holding the coffee cup. The producer looked at the cup as if he had forgotten it was in his hand. He set it down. He did not drink from it. He did not speak. Bruce Lee stepped down from the platform. He picked up his dark blue jacket from the edge of the stage. He put it on. He returned to seat 11 of the 4th row, left center section, and he sat down with both feet flat on the floor. He took the notebook from the inside pocket. He opened it. He wrote something. He closed it. He stayed for the remainder of the broadcast. He left without speaking to anyone from the production staff. He left without speaking to Vicharadchayo. He left without giving a comment to the journalist moderator who attempted to intercept him in the corridor outside and was met with a polite but complete refusal. He was in a taxi 5 minutes after the broadcast ended. The taxi driver did not recognize him. Arthit Sriwan, the tournament director from the Thailand Boxing Federation, spoke to 3 colleagues by telephone in the 48 hours that followed. He used the same word in all 3 conversations. The word translated from Thai means approximately recalibration. He said the word not to describe what had happened to Vicharadchayo, but to describe what had happened to his own understanding of what elite martial knowledge could look like when it had been developed outside of the structures he knew how to evaluate. The story left stage 4 through the people who had witnessed it, which is how all true stories travel. It went first to the Thai boxing community in Japan, through Arthit Sriwan, and through 3 other Thai fighters who had been in the guest row. It went to the Hollywood martial arts community through a stunt coordinator named Dennis Tanaka, who had been in the audience as a production observer and who told the story at a gym in Burbank 6 weeks later. It went to the broader martial arts world through the journalist moderator, who did not write about it for 2 years, but then wrote about it in a way that did not quite capture the 7 seconds because she had been watching the wrong thing at the wrong moment and could only describe what she had felt rather than what she had seen. The story did what stories do when they carry a real thing inside them. It grew in some directions and contracted in others. In certain versions it lasted 30 seconds. In others it lasted 2 minutes. In a version that circulated in a Californian dojo network in the mid-1970s, there was a second exchange after the first, which did not occur. In every version, without exception, the final movement was the same: the open hand, extended, the apology. The fork in the road and the direction chosen. Vicharadchayo continued fighting professionally until 1975. He retired with a record of 54 professional bouts and 6 losses, 4 of which came in the 5 years after October 1970. Those who trained alongside him in his later career have described a Radchayo who fought differently, more patient, more measured, less committed to proving the first claim with a second one. Whether the Thursday evening in Tokyo was the source of that change is a question no one can answer with the certainty that facts require. People are not linear. Change is not always traceable. What can be said is that a fighter who had been defined by the certainty of his first read became, in his later career, a fighter who waited longer before committing to it. He gave one interview late in his retirement to a Thai sports journalist in 1987. He was asked whether he remembered a particular television appearance in Japan in 1970. He said that he did. He was asked what he remembered about it. He said that I was answered by a man who did not raise his voice, and that this was the correct answer. He was not asked, and did not volunteer, what the private sentence had been. Bruce Lee did not speak publicly about the evening on Stage 4 at Nippon Television. He did not mention it in the interviews he gave in the following years, which were numerous and occasionally detailed about his philosophy and his influences. He did not reference it in his notes, which were extensive and have been examined by researchers and biographers in the decades since his death. Whether he considered it remarkable is not knowable. He encountered remarkable things frequently. What is documented in the notebook he was carrying that evening, a notebook that was later catalogued as part of his personal archive, is a single entry dated October of 1970. The entry contains 3 words that refer to a technical observation about elbow strike mechanics at close range, followed by a question mark, followed by a note to revisit. It is exactly the kind of entry that a serious student makes when he has learned something he has not yet fully understood. He was always learning. That was not a quality that fame attached to him later. It was a quality that existed before fame arrived, and that fame did not change, and that the people who encountered him in rooms like Stage 4, in moments like the ones he manufactured without trying to manufacture them, consistently identified as the thing they had not expected. Dennis Tanaka, the stunt coordinator who had been in the audience and who told the story in a Burbank gym 6 weeks later, said something that was repeated in several subsequent retellings. He said, "I have worked with 112 fighters in my career. Every one of them had something to prove. That night I watched a man who had already proven it, to himself, in private. Years before anyone asked him to. The only thing that happened on that stage was that the rest of the room caught up. The audience caught up. The room caught up. The story spread and mutated and found its shape across 3 decades and 6 languages, and at the center of every version, the 30-second version and the 2-minute version, and the version with the invented second exchange, the same thing remained. A man stood up from the 4th row in street shoes. He set his jacket on the edge of a stage. He stood 6 feet from the most decorated Muay Thai champion in the southern half of Asia. He waited. He did not raise his voice. And in 7 seconds, with 3 movements, one of which was not even a technique but simply a step, he answered every word that had been said at the microphone by saying nothing at all. There is a kind of answer that cannot be argued with, not because it is louder than the question, but because it is more precise. The question tries to diminish. The answer demonstrates. The demonstration is finished before the person asking the question has decided what to do about the answer. This is the specific economy of a person who has spent years building something real, in private, for reasons that have nothing to do with an audience. The story a man tells about himself from a microphone in front of 400 people is a particular kind of story. It is the story he needs to be true. The truth of it is tested in the space between that microphone and the man who has just stood up from the fourth row. What closes that space is not argument, not explanation, not a louder voice or a longer list of credentials. What closes it is patience and precision and the willingness to let a 7-second answer last for 50 years. Bruce Lee understood that the real work happens before anyone is watching. The preparation that no audience witnesses, the hours in the training hall in Hong Kong at 13, 14, 15, the questions written in notebooks, the technical observations followed by question marks followed by notes to revisit. The private accumulation of a competence that belongs to the person who built it before it belongs to anyone who tries to describe it. The studio lights on stage 4 were fluorescent and the color of old bone. Outside, traffic moved in the streets of a city that did not know what had happened in the building. The delivery vehicle finished backing into its loading bay. The driver set his handbrake and went inside. In seat 11 of the fourth row, left center section, a man in a white t-shirt opened his notebook and wrote 3 words and a question mark and a note to revisit. He would not need to revisit it. He already knew. Next, we will be going inside the story of how Steve McQueen, one of the most physically capable men in Hollywood, a trained boxer and race driver who had never in his adult life backed away from a confrontation, sat down with Bruce Lee in a room in Bel Air and said something that nobody in McQueen's circle believed he would ever say to anyone. The full story. The room. The witness. What was said and why it was never repeated in public during McQueen's lifetime. That is next.